Hello. How's everybody going? How are we doing? Are we back? Are we back? Yeah, we're back. Like as soon as I faded down the starting soon thing and went to full screen, internet done crashed. It said, "Hey, none of that tonight. You're going off. You're going offline." Let's see. How do we want to do this? We got a little office hours tonight. I know we have a quiz tomorrow, so there might be some questions. Let's see. Alrighty. So I see Erebus, Akash, T-Dub, G's Louise, Nathan, and Mr. Chang in the chat. What up, guys? What are we doing? It's hot in my room right now. I'm gonna crack open a window. All right. Trying to adjust the light intensity back here because I want that one to be brightest, and then I want, that's fine. Maybe go like that. Ashi, you've already got a question. Let's see what it is. So you will want to know about how hyperglycemia is related to the risk of depression and dementia. So when we talk about hyperglycemia, remember that just means, for those of you who are just along for the Ashi show, getting free information off of Ashi's intriguing questions. What's up, Ahana? Hyperglycemia is when you have a usually chronic high blood sugar, right? So this is usually because you have some sort of diabetes, either type 1 or type 2, that's causing you to have insulin insensitivity, which means that your body is unable to remove the sugar from the blood. And so you end up with hyperglycemia. The reason why this has a connection to something like depression and dementia. What's up, Arya? When we talk about depression and dementia, they're connected to this idea of high blood sugar because high blood sugar has a number of negative effects, long-term chronic effects. One of them is when you have high blood sugar, you also have hypertension usually, meaning high blood pressure. So that's one issue. So you've got high blood pressure, which is an issue. And then on top of the high blood pressure, that's an issue. Where's this one go? 1 second. So on top of the high blood sugar, that's an issue. You've also got just having a lot of glucose in your blood. Turns out that glucose is a sort of a sticky molecule to an extent. It likes to sort of stick to things and attach itself to stuff, and which can kind of interfere with the way things function. So not only is your blood pressure high, but you've got this stuff in your blood that's a little bit kind of interfering with the normal processes of other molecules. It likes to stick to them. So let's go ahead and switch our scene up here. Let's go back. Let's go to our office hours look, and we'll pull up a paint browser. Let's make sure, get this the right. Let's fit this into our grid here. There we go. Okay. So you've got two issues. So you've got high blood sugar, which leads to increased blood pressure, and as well as, so plus I'm trying to remember the term. Actually, let's pull up a web page here. What's the term for when sugar sticks to stuff? Other molecules. I think there's a term for this. At first I thought it was glycosylation, but that's not what I think it is. That's something else. Let's look up hyperglycemia and dementia. We'll just look this up because they might mention the name of the thing I'm looking for. What's up, Mr. Moose Hugs? Let's see if we can control F. What are we looking for? We're looking for, oh wait, here we go. It is glycosylation, so I was right. Glycosylation. That's what I thought, but for some reason I was double guessing myself. So not only does hyperglycemia increase your blood pressure, but it also increases glycosylation because you have excess sugar kind of floating around in your bloodstream chronically. One of the problems with blood pressure is it tends to put a lot of puts a lot of excess pressure on your blood vessels, and can cause peripheral issues. There's also something called gluco-toxicity, which is when you have too much glucose. And you can kind of see here some of the complications, right? Neuropathy, so that means when your nerves begin to, your nerve function begins to decrease. This is why sometimes people with chronic hyperglycemia or type 2 diabetes can end up having, painful infections in their peripheral, like their legs or feet, because they're not getting enough, there's no innervation in their feet anymore because of the neuropathy due to the blood pressure in their feet, and also due to potentially glucotoxicity. And I would guess we probably don't have the perfect explanation for why hyperglycemia causes a deterioration of cognitive function, as it mentions here. But my guess would have to be something to do with the excess blood pressure in the brain. Plus, on top of that, maybe something to do with glycosylation or glucotoxicity that would impair some of the neuron functioning of the brain. Just like it can impair the neurons in the feet and lead to things like amputations and infections and gangrene in really severe cases. I imagine there's some sort of similar functioning going on inside the brain, which is also neural, right, as is part of the nervous system. So let's take a quick look and kind of see. Let's just read this real quick and see if we can find an answer. But I want to answer a couple other questions real quick, Ashi, because Ashi, sometimes, oh, you already answered somebody else's. I was going to say, Ahana, I wanted to get to her question about which topics, but you got it. Oh, but she also asked about the endocrine system. So the endocrine system, all you really need to know, we didn't have as much time this year to go into any more detail. Although, to be honest, normally we don't have much time to get into a lot of detail on the endocrine system. So the only thing that you really need to reference for the endocrine system, and you should be fine, is the homework that we did. The endocrine system worksheet. What's up, Bharathi? How are you doing? Thanks for stopping in. And if you've got any questions, so remember this worksheet that we went through? So essentially, the top part is you filled in the blanks to just get a general description of the endocrine system. It's more just like a basic function. And then from that point forward, I give you a couple organs with some hormones, and you are looking at their function. So what you should know is the very basic description of the endocrine system, like just a sort of, Cliff Note version of it. And then you should just be aware of some of the important organs and hormones that are part of the endocrine system and in their functions. So if you kind of refresh yourself on this worksheet and understand this one, you should be fine as far as the endocrine system is on the quiz. Moose Hugs, how did you know that glycosylation is when sugar sticks to other things? Did you know that from previous knowledge? Or are you somebody who's like, interested in science? Because that's pretty good. You're in med school. Cheers to that. Correct. By the way, so if you're in med school, so we're in bio, we're doing our physiology unit. So we're starting to talk about the different body systems a little bit. If you hear me say something that's completely wrong and you hear me spout some sort of nonsense, correct me. Intervene. Like, excuse me, sir. That is not a correct thing that you're saying. So to return back to your question, Ashi, of this idea of hyperglycemia and its connection to dementia, just going to reference, I think because I don't exactly know the mechanisms behind it, I think referencing this article here probably is going to be a better move. I just know that hyperglycemia causes a couple things, but the question of like, what is that next step of like, okay, so what? Now you've got maybe some, like, how does glucotoxicity lead to something like dementia? Or how does like high blood pressure lead to something like dementia? But ultimately, like I don't think you need to know the exact like mechanism going on within the actual like what is actually happening, but you just understand that there's some negative things that are associated with high blood sugar that cause impairment in the function of some nerves in the brain, right? So we've got like really important functions so dementia is usually associated with like memory, right? So obviously, if parts of your brain are becoming damaged due to glucotoxicity or high blood pressure, you could imagine that might impact that function, which could lead to an impact in memory, which would be like a dementia. So what else does it say here? So let's move down and look at the right here. So this is probably what we care about most, this paragraph here. Hyperglycemia and cognitive function. So dementia is a disease that cognitive function. So it doesn't seem like dementia is just about memory. So it seems like dementia is a little bit more than memory, because cognitive function is not just memory, right? Cognitive function is a little bit of memory, but it's also like processing as well. So it's more than that. So it says diabetic subjects have increased risk for developing dementia later in life. Because diabetes and dementia have long-term progression in general, long-term follow-up examination is needed to investigate the association between diabetes and dementia. So far, no estimate of diabetes-related dementia is available. However, previous epidemiological analysis and systemic reviews have consistently demonstrated increased risk of dementia in diabetes. Prospective analysis of the cardiovascular health study, cognition study, that's where they have like the word study in there twice is weird to me, revealed that incidence of dementia was higher in subject with diabetes by 14.9% than those in non. Oh, by 10. So only, what is that? Not even 4%, or not even 5% rather. During examination periods in 1992 to 1999, the increased risk for dementia was additive and the presence of ApoE4 allele in the diabetic subjects. So there's this, if you have this allele, you might be more prone to dementia. Wait, ApoE4, I've heard of that before. Yes, I've heard it connected to Alzheimer's. That's where I heard it was from. Another prospective analysis of Uppsala longitudinal study of adult men had a meeting follow. Oh, here's this is actually what we care about, the mechanisms. That was just describing the problem. Oh, here's a great little graph. Yes, Bharati, you said, can we go over sodium bicarbonate does? Ashi, you said, I think. Yeah, so Bharati, Ashi did pretty much a good job there. Now, I don't know if you could see that, Bharati, because you're on YouTube and Ashi's on Twitch. But if you look at the chat on screen, you should see her response to you. Okay, good. But yeah, she's pretty much right on point there. So the sodium bicarbonate is essentially an alkaline solution that has a basic pH, which is secreted into the small intestine in order to neutralize the acid that's in the chyme coming from the stomach. And it's just a way to prevent irritation and damage to the small intestine from the acidic conditions, because the small intestine is not meant to handle low pHs like the stomach is. Yeah, so it just buffers that. Mr. Moose Hugs, technically the definition of dementia is the progression of neurodegenerative disease to the point where a person can no longer take care of themselves. Took you 2 years of med school to learn that. Well, I'm glad that happened. So yeah, so it's not just memory, right? It's almost like the entire function of the brain is sort of diminishing. Because I imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, but people with dementia, not only is their memory suffering and their processing suffer, but I imagine that is there balance and like coordination, like physical coordination, suffer as well. All right, so look at this. Look at this image here. So it says neuroinflammation, oxidative stress, mitochondrial dysfunction, brain insulin resistance, hyperglycemia. Okay, what is going on with this diagram, dude? What are these all pointing to? Let me see real quick. I'm trying to open this window. I forgot that you guys can't, when I click open something, you can't see it because it's not actually coming up. Ritwika, when you said sodium bicarbonate, yeah, I forgot to mention that's true. That is another bonus. Yeah, that's a really good point. I forgot about that. The pancreatic enzymes do need a neutral pH to function properly, and if there's an acidic condition in the small intestine, those enzymes will probably denature and be less effective. That's a good point. I didn't think about that. Good point, Ritwika. Thank you. Are you guys not seeing this? Let me add a browser source. Oh, window capture. That's what I want to do. Okay. So this is what this looks like when I pop that out. So what I'll do is just put this there, and then this will come here in the middle. Okay. So this diagram just sort of shows that I don't really get this diagram actually because the arrows don't make sense to me. So it's saying that oxidative stress and neuroinflammation lead to brain insulin resistance and hyperglycemia. I don't know if that feels, I mean, maybe. I'm going to get rid of that though. Brain insulin resistance and amyloid genesis are central for hypoglycemia. Okay, so it looks like amyloid genesis. Now this, if I recall correctly, amyloid genesis is the creation of amyloid plaques, which are also connected to, I think, Alzheimer's. So it seems like something with hyperglycemia can cause these plaques, these amyloid beta things to form, which are these things in the brain that kind of like gum up the works of everything and cause things to get all stuck and not function properly. So I do know that there is a connection between amyloid, these amyloid plaques. I think they're amyloid plaques. I don't know, maybe Moose Hugs can correct me if I'm wrong. Amyloid beta plaques, right? And Alzheimer's. This is one of the main issues with Alzheimer's, which also, I'm pretty sure that Alzheimer's is a form of dementia. So it's kind of all related. Right? So those plaques lead to neuropathical changes, which probably impairs neuronal integrity, and your neurons degenerate, which gives you poor cognitive performance. Yeah, so it's like a whole pathway of a variety of different mechanisms that are going on here. So prolonged exposure of hyperglycemia and hyperinsulinemia, which means like excess insulin, as well as high levels of amyloid beta in the brain can lead to deterioration of neuronal structure and function, resulting in poor cognitive performance. Yeah, so it's a cascade effect, right? In the end. All right, let me get to some of these other questions here that I see people are answering. Yes, Amina, HCl is produced in the stomach by parietal cells. Praval, how many questions are going to be on the quiz? There's going to be, let me do a quick math real quick in my head here. 9, what's 9 plus 8 plus 6? 23. Diaz, you are correct. How did you guys know 23? Did I say that? Wait, how did everyone know 23? Did I accidentally like publish the quiz early or something? I always worry about that on Schoology, right? So like you create an assignment, you create the quiz and I set it up so that the next day I can just publish it. But sometimes like I accidentally like leave it published. I'm sure that's happened. I'm sure teachers have done that. Miss Lerner said it in her office hours. That makes sense. Got it. Amina, how many sections is the quiz going to be broken into? 3. It's going to be broken into 3 sections. So if we look at our unit guide, you'll notice that there's 4 topics that we're covering here in the first section in this quiz. There's 4 topics. But we're going to lump together 1B and 1C into one topic, into one part of the quiz. Oh yeah, tau tangles. That's right. That's the other thing. Tau tangles. Bharati, could I go over once again why it would be more concerning if someone has heartburn very often? Why it would be concerning if someone has heartburn very often? So remember, a better way, so just really quickly, the term heartburn is kind of a misnomer. It's used more like casual, but heartburn equals is a better term for heartburn is acid reflux. And the word acid reflux, I feel like, is more clear as to what's actually going on, right? So what's happening with acid reflux is, you can imagine, let's say here's your esophagus, right? Let's say here's your esophagus. And let's say you've got your stomach here. Your stomach. So one of the problems that can happen due to a variety of reasons, maybe it can be genetic, but it can also be connected to things like obesity, the kinds of food you eat, like alcohol, tobacco, smoking cigarettes, spicy foods even. Or sometimes a bacteria infection called Helicobacter pylori can cause issues with irritation and ulcers and sores on the lining of your stomach or your esophagus. Now, the Helicobacter pylori is more associated with peptic ulcers, which are like these sore spots in your stomach due to the bacteria causing issues. Acid reflux is when you have at the base of your esophagus let's use purple here, where your esophagus and stomach meet, you have something called the LES, or the lower esophageal sphincter. This is a circular muscle, and this circular muscle, its only role is to cinch closed and keep the esophagus and the stomach kind of separated. And the point is to prevent, we'll use orange here. So we'll say the orange is HCl, or we could even say, we could say chyme or something like that, right? Whatever, it's just the acidic contents of the stomach. What happens is we get that refluxes, or comes back or goes up from where it's meant to be in the stomach up into the esophagus, and starts to irritate the lining of the esophagus. Now, if this is happening over and over and over again, or like you have chronic acid reflux, now, of course, there's medications. You can take things to help prevent acid reflux. But if you continually have this, what you could imagine happening is slow but sure irritation. You could end up with ulcers, could lead to ulcers, right? So it's possible, could lead to ulcers in your esophagus if it's chronic and bad enough. And like, why are ulcers bad? Well, because it's literally an open sore in the lining of your esophagus that is going to potentially could get infected. And in worst case scenarios, if these sores, these ulcers, these peptic ulcers, they get bad enough, they can actually technically create a hole in the lining of your stomach, or potentially even esophagus. And if there's a hole, then that's a real problem, because then all the contents can leak out into your abdominal cavity, or, wherever it is. So let's see. Ahana, what should you know about nutrition? Nutrition is basically just like, if you can really understand the video lecture that we had on just the good diet, the properties of a good diet, including the kinds of carbohydrates you want to steer yourself towards, the kinds of fats, the sources of good protein, the idea of eating a diet that's rich in unprocessed foods, more plant-based, and getting your protein from healthy protein sources like beans, nuts, fish, right? Trying to limit animal protein to an extent, especially red meat, and definitely eliminating or limiting sugar, high glycemic index items like sugary foods, snacks, candies, processed foods, those kinds of things. But yeah, refer to the video lecture. That's where you really want to spend your time. Let's see. So a lot more questions coming in here. Did someone get the role of the thymus for Amina? Ritvika, thank you. Thymus secretes hormones that cause T cells to become immunocompetent, which means that the immune cells have fully learned to recognize foreign antigens. Yeah, basically, exactly what Ritvika said. Your immune system has cells, right? Some of these cells are called T cells. There are other called B cells. But your immune system is what fights off any foreign entity that needs to be gotten rid of in your body, right? So this would be like viruses, bacteria, a lot of other things. But together we call these things like antigens or pathogens. And your immune system has to be able to recognize. So the thymus secretes thymosin, which is a hormone that helps your immune systems become immunocompetent, meaning they're able to recognize these foreign antigens and help your immune system fight them off. So it's a boost to your immune system. Sanjay, can I explain the function of the pyloric sphincter? Ashi tried to explain that. She said the sphincter is between the stomach and the small intestine. The big thing is prevent the half digested stuff from the small intestine from entering the stomach. Yeah, and vice versa too, Ashi. It just kind of acts as a... So actually we can use the same diagram, right? So let's use purple again. So right here is your pyloric sphincter. And the pyloric sphincter acts as a barrier between the stomach and the small intestine. Right, so of course this is going to be our small intestine. So of course you want to have something here that can close and block things from moving in either direction. So first of all, you don't want anything going backwards back into the stomach once it's in the small intestine. For obvious reasons, you want everything to be flowing in one direction. And two, you don't want the contents of the stomach to pass into the small intestines too early and too soon, because there's important digestion going on in the stomach, right? We have the release of pepsinogen, which is converted to pepsin, which breaks down some protein in the stomach. And we also have some mechanical digestion happening with the ringing peristaltic motion of the stomach as it squeezes and contracts and kind of pushes that stuff around. So you've got important stuff happening in the stomach. So what we need is for it to hang out there for some hours before it moves to the small intestine to continue the rest of the digestive process. Sanjay, what makes pepsinogen? The chief cells. Chief? They are the chief. I don't know why they're called chief cells, but they are chief cells. Well, no, chief cells make pepsinogen. But then remember, pepsinogen, once it's in the stomach and is exposed to the low pH of the stomach, it is converted to pepsin, which is the active form of the enzyme that then can digest protein. And then I think some people are confused with some terminology here. So there's basically 4 words. Oh, let me think. Yeah, there's 4 words that you could use to describe the material that's passing through your digestive tract. So there's So let's let me make a new one here. So let's do this. So let's do your digestive tract, just in a very basic sense. This is actually like really hard to draw. That's bad. Oh no, I went the wrong side. My bad. That's so bad. Okay, that's your basic digestive system. Hold on, I need some eraser here. Ignore the terribleness of it and and the messiness of the entire thing. Just sort of ignore all that. So you've got, at this point, so you've got at the top, so here's your mouth, esophagus, stomach, large, we'll say it's called this the large intestine. And then inside is here's the small intestine. So it starts off, we call it, as you're eating it, like obviously before you put it in your mouth, it is called food. Okay. When you put it in your mouth and you chew it and you swallow it, now it is called a bolus. Once it's in the stomach and it becomes like a liquidy kind of like slushy liquidy kind of thing, now we call it chyme. That chyme, right, it goes down. That chyme then passes all through your small intestine into your large intestine. As it's coming around your large intestine, once it enters the end of the large intestine and ends in the colon, we call it feces. I don't think there's any other terms here. So it goes from food to a bolus to chyme to feces. That's the kind of order there. What up, Yash? It's going well, man. Thanks for checking in. Just doing a little office hours on some physiology stuff today. What is the difference between gastric acid and hydrochloric acid, or is the hydrochloric acid part of the stomach acid mixture? Yeah, basically, so Ritwika, gastric acid, I believe, is the same. Is hydrochloric acid is the acid that's secreted to create your gastric acid. I don't think there's a difference. It's a good question though, and I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head. Let's see. I'm guessing that gastric acid, stomach acid is a digestive fluid formed within the stomach. Yeah, so this is it's the same thing. So hydrochloric acid is the name of the acid that's actually secreted. But once that acid is used in your stomach, we give it a general name of gastric acid, is the kind of the way it works. Let's see, Ashi, because steroid hormones are lipids, would they also still be able to transport directly through the blood vessels? Or is it different because they're lipids? Steroid hormones are lipids. Well, steroid hormones, you mean like hormones that you eat or take? Or are you talking about the hormones that our body secretes? Because when your body secretes hormones, they are passed through the circulatory system, through the blood. I wonder if there is hormones. Do hormones circulate in the lymph as well? I wonder. They might actually. I don't know. Well, I'll say maybe. It seems like it's possible. They do? Okay, thanks, Moose Hugs. Do you know, is like one, is it typically like an even mix between them, or is it kind of like... Oh, I see. Oh, I didn't see the other part that you wrote there. Steroids are non-polar molecules that are non-dissolvable in water, so transport. Oh, okay, nice. I didn't know that. Good stuff. Let's see. By the way, if I miss your question in the chat, let me know. Because sometimes I might miss it. Because it kind of goes a little fast on these office hour days. Okay, Amina, I see your question now. What are the names of the enzymes that break down each of the different biomolecules? So actually, there's a lot of different enzymes that break down the four different biomolecules. So it's not like there's one enzyme that breaks down lipids, one enzyme that breaks down proteins, and one enzyme that breaks down fats. In fact, there is a variety of different kinds of enzymes that break them all down. In general, we can kind of give general broad names to these categories. So for example, let's make a new one here. So for example, you have things like lipases, which is like a category of enzymes. There's different kinds of lipases, right? So lipases would break down, obviously, lipids. But there's a variety of different ones. And you don't need to know any specific... You don't need to know specific names of enzymes for this class. You got lipases. You've got something like proteases, which are for proteins, I believe. It's a class of enzymes called proteins. What else? You've got, Moose Dogs, am I right with this? Is it carboxylase? That's a carbohydrate. And you've got, so actually there are actually a couple enzymes that you do need to know now that I'm thinking about it. So you need to know amylase, which is a carbohydrate breaking down. You need to know pepsin, which is for proteins as well. Those are the two that you need to know specifically because they're kind of unique in the fact that they're enzymes that are released in places other than the small intestine. So for example, like amylase is released in the saliva, which is interesting because that's where digestion actually begins. Like as soon as you start chewing your food, if it contains like something like starches, those will start to be broken down by the amylase in your saliva. And then in the stomach, you've got this pepsin that's working on breaking down proteins. And then when you get to the small intestine, you've got all sorts of enzymes from the pancreas and the small intestine, including all sorts of different kinds of enzymes for lipids, proteins, and carbs. Carboxylase adds carboxyl. Oh, okay, yeah, never mind. Scratch that. Proval, no. Hormones are not enzymes. Although hormones and enzymes can both be made of protein, they have very different functions. Hormones are messenger molecules that travel through the body to send signals from one organ or gland or tissue to another to kind of communicate from throughout the body. Whereas enzymes, their role is to actually catalyze reactions, like chemical reactions, build molecules up or break them down. So they're two different things, even though they might be made of the same biomolecule. Sanjay, is bile a lipase? No. Bile is not a lipase. It's not an enzyme. This is what a lot of people actually got this question wrong on the temp check. Bile is mechanical digestion. It is not chemical digestion. It breaks down large globs of fats into smaller droplets. It doesn't actually do any chemical. It doesn't actually like break the bonds of the lipids. It doesn't go in and actually disassemble the lipid molecules themselves. It just breaks down big blobs so that the lipases have a more surface area to do it. So the bile does mechanical digestion of large globs of lipids, right? And then now that you've got all these, right, so you can imagine like a big old blob of a lipid, which is then broken down into like tiny little droplets. And then you have your lipases. So you have bile here that does this, and then the lipases come in and actually break them down into like the individual components. I don't really know how to draw that on here, but like the lipases do the final chemical digestion. The pituitary gland. Bharathi, what exactly is the function of the pituitary gland? The pituitary gland is, that's a tough one. That's like a broad, a lot of, I think it has a lot of variety of function. Moose Hugs, you think endocrine system is the trickiest? Trying to think. Endocrine is one of the hardest disciplines. Yeah. I mean, I guess so. It's just probably so complicated, right? Like you have to know so many pathways. There's so many hormones, and they interact with so many different receptors with so many different tissues in so many different ways at so many different times due to so many different factors, right? It's like, I imagine it's like trying to memorize like a giant like branching diagram that just goes on forever. And that keeps getting added to like every year with more and more pathways. It does seem pretty chaotic. So, okay, so the pituitary gland. Let's pull up a so there's something that's kind of important about the pituitary gland in terms of the role that it plays. So yeah, so Ritwika said something that I think is pretty good, and Ashi kind of echoed that, this idea that it's like a master gland, right? We use this term master gland. So let me hold on, let me pull this up. Get rid of paint. So here's like a little diagram that might get you the sense of why it's called a master gland. So it's called a master gland because it influences the stimulation of many different organs and glands in the body. So for example, the pituitary gland in the brain will respond to signals from the hypothalamus, which will then send that signal on to whatever gland is in question at that time, right? So it might secrete growth hormone that impacts the growth of muscles, bones, and organs, right? It might send a signal to your sex organs, your ovaries or testes, depending if you're biologically male or female, which could then trigger them to produce the sex hormones, which will cause your body to develop, your secondary sex characteristics. And, a variety of other things here. It also releases, this is one that we talked about, ADH, which is the antidiuretic hormone that sends a signal to the kidney to tell it to reabsorb water if you're dehydrated. So I think when you think about the pituitary gland, think of it as almost like a kind of like a puppeteer to an extent, in that it's controlling the action of many of your other endocrine system functions, whether it be glands or organs, or even tissues that are just responding to the hormones from the pituitary gland. Now, one other thing to keep in mind here that's interesting is you have the hypothalamus that sort of sits above it. The hypothalamus actually does send signals to the pituitary gland. The hypothalamus acts like a let me think. How can I phrase this? The hypothalamus and again, maybe Moose Hug, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but as far as I'm aware, the hypothalamus is what is sort of more of the sensory part of your brain that's sensing the levels of your hormones in the blood, and acts as like a feedback mechanism. So if they get too high, it says to the pituitary gland, hey, you need to dial it back a little bit. These are getting too high, so scale it back, right? Or maybe it's too low, so scale it up. So the pituitary gland kind of takes its commands from the hypothalamus, but the hypothalamus is giving the orders to the pituitary gland based off of what it's sensing insofar as the concentration of these chemicals in the blood, these hormones. And that's sort of like a way of maintaining homeostasis in the body. That's sort of the way I understand it. And so I think they sometimes, if I want to say there's a name for this axis, the what is it? The HPA, Hypopituitary Axis. Is that right? Hypopituitary? Well, it's not hypopituitary. It's HPA, right? Axis. Hypothalamus, pituitary. Oh, and then adrenal. The adrenal axis. But that's not exactly what we're talking about. That's a very specific pathway, actually. Axis of cortisol. Oh, that's the stress pathway. Sorry. HPA, never mind. The HPA axis is a very particular one that's not actually listed on here. Oh, here it is. Right here. This is the one, the HPA. So one of these is the HPA axis, not the whole thing. Do you need to know all these details? Amina, no. You don't need to know all of these details. No. So, Amina, let me just fill you in a little bit. Sometimes on these streams, people ask questions that dive into things a little beyond the scope of the class. And I indulge that to an extent because it's interesting and people want to know. But just be aware that sometimes we get in a little bit over our heads as far as where the class level is. So, yeah, you do not need to know anything like this. We're just sort of going around things and expanding on them. So, yeah, we didn't cover this. Ashi, why are estrogen and progesterone used in birth control? Well, the way that works is the ovaries respond to levels of these hormones. So if the hormones are at certain levels, and I don't know exactly if it's like if they're high or low, I think there's a certain level. I don't know exactly what the level is, but the idea is that when you take birth control pills, you alter the hormonal state of your body, and then the ovaries sense that, or maybe not even maybe the ovaries don't sense that. Maybe the hypothalamus senses it, which sends a signal to the pituitary gland, which then sends a signal to the ovaries. Could be something like that. But either way, the ovaries will respond, either directly or indirectly, to the hormones in the birth control, and they will. It's almost like it mimics what it mimics is a pregnancy. So when you are pregnant, when you are actually pregnant, your ovaries do not secrete eggs. They do not release eggs. So normally, right, if a female has reached, a biological female has reached puberty, on a monthly basis, an egg is released from the ovary so that it can be fertilized, potentially, and cause a pregnancy. But during pregnancy, it obviously doesn't make sense to be releasing eggs because that's a waste of eggs, and it's also never going to be a pregnancy because you're currently pregnant. And so there are certain signals that a pregnancy sends to the body that stop that. So if you mimic that signal by taking birth control, your body's like, oh, we're pregnant, even though you're not. So you don't release eggs. If you don't release eggs, you cannot get pregnant because there is no egg there to be fertilized. So, Bharati, would insulin count as a hormone? Yeah, absolutely. Yep, insulin is for sure a hormone. Ritwika, so the hypothalamus secretes neurohormones which control the production of other hormones by the pituitary, right? So the hypothalamus secretes hormones which control the... Yeah, pretty much. That's pretty much right on, Ritwika. That's a, yep, great way to describe it. Here's a little more realistic diagram of the thalamus and the pituitary, just so you can get more of a sense of exactly where it is. Pituitary gland is a tiny little thing right there, just dangling off the bottom of the thalamus. Oh, actually, this doesn't even have the hypothalamus in it. Tim, what up, Tim? I saw you earlier. I don't know if I said hi to you. I saw your hi, but I don't know. Did you say it? Could have sworn I saw you earlier. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Does this not look like, does anyone not think this looks kind of like a little chicken or something? Or a little like creature? You've got like these are the arms here, and this is the head, and this is like the beak. Seahorse. There you go. Amat, a seahorse. I kind of ruined it, but you can't really... Looks like a chicken brain. You'd actually be surprised at like how like parts of the human brain, like if you remove some of the cerebral cortex, which is like the wrinkled parts up here, like if you remove a lot of the top wrinkled part and you kind of get down to the core on the base of the brain, it's sort of, that's more of a primitive brain that exists. When I say primitive, I mean, I don't know. I don't think people like to use the word I think the problem using the word primitive indicates some sort of like hierarchy of brains. I mean, it's definitely has less processing power, which I guess you could then say it's you know, not quite as good. But the problem you run into is when you actually look at things through an evolutionary lens, the idea of something being better than something else doesn't really make sense as long as the organism is able to survive and reproduce. It's just as good as anything else because the organism is still around, right? It still works. It just works for its environment. But yeah, so you could kind of, a lot of this stuff here you would find in any other animal brain, or not a lot. In fact, you probably find all of this stuff just at you just say a reduced amount of the stuff up top. Ahana, see you later. Thanks for stopping in. Amina, so just for the endocrine, do we just need to know the basic functions of each hormone? Yeah. Yeah. Wait, what do you mean by onky? What's onky, Mr. Moosehugs? The relationship between T3 and T4 is kind of like pepsin and pepsinogen, where T4 is converted to T3. Yeah, kind of. That's a good analogy. You have a precursor molecule that is converted after it's produced into a form that is more functional or more effective. Looking up that onky thing you were talking about, I'm wondering if it would be useful for me to use as a tool. Yeah, Ashi, it's you're thinking of thymosin, not thyroxine. Yeah. And yes, I don't know if I answered that before, but yes, you just need to know the basic function of each of the hormones from this worksheet. This is literally the extent that we're going to cover the hormones in this class. This very basic overview. We just, with remote learning this year, we just don't have as much time as we normally would, and so we're going to kind of leave it here. It's very basic. I know we're not going to get into a lot of detail, but so Ashi, you want to know about thymosin. Bharatha, you want to know about thyroxine. Ritvika, you're explaining thyroxine by saying it regulates metabolic rate by increasing the rate of cellular respiration. Yeah, so to an extent, yeah, it does a little bit of other things besides just cellular respiration. I mean, it's definitely increasing metabolic rate there, but it also impacts things like digestion, and it kind of impacts some other organs too, if I remember correctly, like the heart and things like that. And I think even muscles. But think of thyroxine, T4 here, when it converts to T3, as as a metabolic regulator. So it helps with all of our metabolism, things like cellular respiration, other chemical reactions. Yeah, so this onky thing. Powerful, intelligent flashcards. Remembering things just became much easier. How is this different than Quizlet, Mr. Moosehugs? Like, how does it compare? Wait, Ashi, you wanted to know about thymosin. Wait, now I'm trying to figure out what your question was. Oh, you actually want to know the exact mechanism for how thymosin preps the T cells? Okay, that's something that we would have to look up together because I don't think I know the exact mechanism for that. Way more convenience in your experience, and you can share decks, easier to distribute, and it's free. But you have to download it though. So it's a program. It's an installed program. Right? It's not a browser based thing. Well, I guess, yeah. So if there's anyone watching right now that likes using flashcards and Quizlet is something that they've used and maybe they want something that's maybe a different, we got a med student in the chat here, Mr. Moosehugs, who's recommending Anki. I don't know if you're gonna get I don't know if you're gonna get a recommendation with more credibility than a med student, especially for something like physio unit. So I would take that recommendation. Anki, A-N-K-I. I'm gonna why is fiber not digested? Yeah, so Ashi is kind of getting at that idea, right? So fiber is cellulose, and the problem with cellulose is that we do not produce the enzyme cellulase to break down cellulose, right? So plants have cell walls that contain cellulose, which is the fiber that we eat in our diet when we eat unprocessed plant foods. Now, that fiber is undigestible by us, and considering that humans are omnivores and also that we cook our food, it's thought that over evolutionary time, the cecum, which is the organ in herbivores that house a bacteria that produces cellulase for these herbivores, so it's like a symbiotic relationship between the bacteria and the animal. So the cecum is this location of all these bacteria that are living inside the organism that are producing cellulase. So when the organism's eating all that grass and plant and vegetation, it goes into this big pouch-like thing called the cecum in the digestive tract where that stuff can get digested. Now in humans, we don't really have a functioning cecum. It's vestigial and it's not as selected for in humans because we have different diets. The fiber that we don't eat as much fiber and as much cellulose. And on top of that, the fiber that we do eat, because we cook our food, tends to be less tough. It's already been a little bit kind of, I don't know if you would call it digested. I'm not sure exactly how does cooking food change cellulose? Cellulose, lignin, and pectin during soaking cooking. Wait, what? Increased? What? No. Yeah, I'm kind of curious if it like breaks down the cellulose when you cook it. Breaks down the fiber. I don't know. This is probably not necessary right now, but I can come back to this. No problem, Bharati. Anytime. Yeah, Arya, exactly. We don't have that kind of bacteria that would be necessary to break down the cellulose, so we don't make the cellulase. So let's see, Ashi, we can kind of go back to your let's see. If we go back to your question, let's see. Let's see. So we want to know thymosin. Let's just look up thymosin on here and see what we find. Let me think about this. What's a good way to search this? Thymosin. Immunocompetence. All right. What up, Mr. Chang? You're about to start your last final. Get it. What's your last final on? You know what? I don't actually like to search on NCBI. I like to search on Google and then find the NCBI article that's relevant. That's what I found has been most effective. Thymosin and immunocompetence. Thymic hormones. Community policing. Okay, nice. Community policing. That sounds very relevant to our recent policing scandals and the recent sort of relatedness to Black Lives Matter and all of this sort of upheaval in regards to law enforcement. I know a lot of people have been pushing for community-based policing, and I don't really know a lot about it, but it seems relevant. Mouse Pillow, what's the basic definition of cellular metabolism? The basic definition of cellular metabolism, I would say, well, it would be the chemical reactions within a cell. Or it may be something like the energy using chemical reactions within a cell. Although I believe all chemical reactions probably either, well, they may not all use it. Some of them release energy. But yeah, something like that. I don't know. If I can find this. Whoops, no, this isn't it. Review of thymic hormones in cancer diagnosis and treatment. Well, maybe this might give us some insight here if they do a little background on how thymus works with the immune system. Okay, let's read the abstract real quick. So, the thymus is a major site of production of immunocompetent T lymphocytes from their hematopoietic stem cells. This complex process requires direct cell-to-cell receptor-based interactions, as well as in situ paracrine information via the numerous cytokines and thymic hormones produced by the cells of the thymic microenvironment. That's a big sentence right there. But don't worry about it. You don't really need to know exactly what that's saying. What up, creepy? How goes it, man? A lot of agencies are already there. It's just not publicized as much. It's mostly larger agencies such as LAPD. Still has its traditional and newer ways, so it's in the mix. Okay. Interesting. Good stuff. Let's see. The sky is up. You always say that, but that's actually not technically true. The sky is not up. What about the sky in what from where you are now? What about the sky in China? Is the sky in China up from where you are or down? I'm gonna be more specific. What kind of sky? Let's see what this says here. Due to the great complexity of intrathymic maturation sequences of T lymphocytes and the diverse immunophenotypically unique subpopulations of T lymphocytes, it is quite unlikely that a single thymic humoral factor could control all of the molecular steps and cell populations involved. Okay, so it's not just thymosin, right? There's other hormones going on in the thymus that are, or other hormones either in the thymus or from coming into the thymus from somewhere else that are probably regulating these T cell lymphocytes. Thymosin fraction 5 and its constituent peptides influence several properties of lymphocytes, including cyclic nucleotide levels, migration inhibitory factor production, T-independent antibody production, as well as the expression of various cell surface maturation/differentiation markers. Okay, so that's your answer right there. This sentence is what you were trying to ask, Ashi, is the answer to your question, the one I just highlighted. Try and parse that sentence on your own. Because this looks very complex. Like, in order for us to really, like, I kind of understand what this is saying, but even I am, like, off. Like, I understand, I think this one is kind of good. Like, this one here is important, the last part, right? Expression of various cell surface maturation and differentiation markers, because for a T cell to be mature, it has to have the correct antigen-sensitive receptors on its surface. So it seems like thymosin helps with that expression some way to get those receptors and surface markers to the surface of the T cell. But yeah, like this would take us probably a full stream to even break the ice on. Yeah, so I think we should take Mr. Moosehug's advice here and not fall into an maybe irrecoverable rabbit hole of immunology. It's a lot. There's so much in there that Mr. Moosehugs, maybe you might agree with me that immunology probably as a discipline rivals endocrine discipline in terms of complexity. Actually, Mr. Moosehug, I would be curious, what do you think is the least difficult discipline? Like if you had to pick one, what medical discipline would you say, or maybe not medical discipline. Let's leave it to the body systems. Which body system discipline? Because you said endocrine and immune are tough. Give us the simplest. And hold on, before you do, I want to guess the one that's the least difficult. Let me think. I think they're all really complicated when you get down to the deeper levels of them. I wanted to say like muscular system, because like we kind of know how muscles contract with the filaments and the sarcoplasmic reticulums and the calcium and the sliding myofibrils and all that stuff. But that's still probably complicated. But a muscle is a muscle, right? It literally has one function to an extent. So I would almost think muscle system. That could be maybe one. I was going to think digestive, but not really. I mean, maybe respiratory. Respiratory is probably not too complicated, but then again, depends, right? Because respiratory does have a lot of, you do get involved with cross systems. Like when you talk about respiratory, it's like, well, respiratory does have immune function. It also interacts with the circulatory system. It also interacts with the muscular system if you start getting into the things like diaphragm. If you throw in innervation, yeah, I didn't even think about the nerve innervation. That's true. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Amina, I did not see your question. Are monosaturated fats fatty acids? Let me think. Are monosaturated fats fatty acids? Yeah. So it's kind of hard to say. So fatty acids is if you look at like a just a picture of a fatty acid. So this is a fatty acid, right? It's just a chain of carbons and hydrogens, right? A long chain of carbons and hydrogens connected to the carboxyl group, which is like this little front part of it. So you have the carboxyl group, then you just have like a long chain of carbons after that, either single bonds or double bonds. So these are fatty acids. So this would be an example of a saturated fatty acid, right? And then this would be an example of a polyunsaturated, because it has at least two double bonds. Right? So for example, so basically the way you differentiate between saturated and unsaturated is the presence of any double bonds in this long carbon chain. So Mr. Chang, many Bay Area agencies such as San Jose, Campbell PD has what are called community service officers that handle low priority calls such as burglary and traffic reports and jobs like what you're doing. Yeah, that makes sense. Like, so for example, Mr. Chang, I know that Cupertino doesn't even have a police department. Is that true? Or do they just rely on Santa Clara County? Do you know how that works? I'm actually not 100% familiar with that, but if someone, maybe it was you, but I feel like someone said Cupertino does not even have its own police department. Amina, do you need to know the difference between them? Well, so Amina, you do need to know the difference between the different kinds of fats, like mono, trans, and saturated. in regards to their health benefits or their effects on your health, like nutrition. You don't need to know you don't need to get too much into the details of these, but you should know that saturated fats, they're called saturated because they are saturated with single bonds, right? And then unsaturated fats because they have at least one or more double bonds between the carbons. So well, actually, maybe it's called saturated because it's saturated with hydrogens, actually. It's probably not the double bonds that it's referencing, or the single bonds it's referencing. This has as many hydrogens as it can possibly have because it's all single bonds between the carbons. Over here, because you have some double bonds between the carbons, you end up with less hydrogens, so it's unsaturated with hydrogens. Respiratory is brutal. I mean, I guess when you start to get into the alveoli, maybe, and like the details of like what's going on, I bet respiratory disorders can be tricky. Talking about like how do things affect the linings of the alveoli and the surfactants and all that kind of stuff. For higher glycemic foods, Ashi, why is it that more glucose can cause more tryptophan to be in the bloodstream and make you more tired? Okay, let's think about this, because I'm pretty sure, and I could be wrong, I've always thought that was a myth. So when I taught physiology as a class, I had always taught that the myth of like, when you eat turkey on Thanksgiving, you get tired because it has extra tryptophan. I thought that was a myth. I thought you got tired just because you ate a lot. And tryptophan was sort of the scapegoat that actually didn't have any relationship to your tiredness. Now, I could be wrong on that. Or maybe tryptophan does connect to tiredness, but like you need so much of it that like the amount you would get in a turkey is not going to do anything. Maybe it was that. The role of tryptophan in fatigue in different conditions of stress. Okay, tryptophan is the precursor to neurotransmitter 5-hydroxytryptamine, 5-HT, which is involved in fatigue and sleep. It is present in bound and free form in the blood when the concentration is controlled by albumin binding to tryptophan. An increase in plasma-free tryptophan leads to an increased rate of entry of tryptophan into the brain. This should lead to a higher level of 5-HT, which may cause central fatigue. Central fatigue is implicated in clinical conditions such as chronic fatigue syndrome and post-operative fatigue. Increased plasma-free tryptophan leads to an increase in the plasma concentration ratio of free tryptophan to be branched chain. Okay, maybe it does. Maybe there is, but I don't know if eating turkey is going to elevate your free-floating tryptophan enough to cause enough 5-HT to be made that it actually gives you fatigue and sleep. I actually don't know. I'm sure someone has done a study on this where they've actually measured the amount of like tryptophan increase based on turkey and what that would turn into. I'm sure someone's looked at it. All right, Bharathi, have a great night. Thanks for stopping in. I will see you during the quiz. Cupertino has a contract with the sheriff's office to provide enforcement. Got it. Got it. Let's see, Amina. So saturated fats, unhealthy, and unsaturated healthy. Also, are trans fats both healthy and unhealthy? No. The way it works, you mix it up, Amina. So trans fats are unhealthy, completely and utterly unhealthy. In fact, most people are. It's the evidence is pretty universal that they're being phased out. Like most people are not even in they're not being included in food items anymore. So for example, like when you talk about like snacks, like in the past they would contain some trans fats, but they're becoming minimal. So the healthy fats are the unsaturated ones, polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats, which are usually found in plant products. Although fish is a great source of unsaturated fats, especially omega-3 fatty acids, which are known to be a really beneficial fat. So oftentimes people like to have fish in their diet as a way of supplementing with healthy fats. And it's a good source of good fat. It's a good source of protein that brings with it good fats. And then the saturated fats are the ones that are unhealthy in high quantities, and especially when you mix them with sugar, or like when you mix them with a high glycemic diet. So you want to steer towards the polyunsaturated fats and away from trans and saturated fats on average. Why does glucose cause more tryptophan to be released? Aria, you asked, what is the function of the immune system? Or which is the function? Yeah, okay. Yo, what up, Yash? Wait, Yash, didn't you come in here before and say hello? Wait, am I off? Wait, did I mistake you for somebody else earlier? Wait, Yash, am I going crazy? Am I literally getting dementia? Didn't you come in here and say hello like a half hour or 45 minutes ago? And now you're coming in here again, pretending like it's the first time you said hello today? Are you trying to like make me question my sanity? Mr. Chang, your department is currently recruiting explorers/volunteers. Would it be okay? Your department is currently recruiting. Explorers and volunteers. Would it be okay if I enter one of your classes and talk about it? That is, you'd have to talk to. You'd have to contact the administration. Because usually if it's anything involving like recruitment in terms of jobs or volunteers or things like that, it has to be run through the office first. So what I would recommend you do if you're interested is do a quick email to, let me think, who would be a good person to contact? I would contact either the assistant principal or the... I guess you could contact Ben Klosnitzer, the principal. You might be able to contact him, and I would send him a email. If he doesn't respond, then maybe send an email to one of the assistant principals. So Aria, when you're talking about phytonutrients, phytonutrients are literally just like a broad category of all of the kinds of chemicals and nutrients that are important and that are found in plants. So we're talking about things like antioxidants. We're talking about things like vitamins and minerals, phytochemicals. It's just a broad kind of thing. So the reason why I threw the term phytonutrients out there is just to give you a sense of like sometimes you'll hear the term phytonutrients, and what that encapsulates is all of the beneficial molecules that we find in plants that are good for our health. That's kind of the gist of it. Yeah, exactly like what Ashi said. Yep. What up, Appa? What is up, A the C? I'm going to call you, instead of Appa the Carry, A the C, or ATC. Did I finish my research about what? League? My research about league? Wait, what research about league? Wait, when you say what? Wait, was I supposed to be doing research on league? I feel like I'm a student right now that didn't know that I had a homework assignment, and I'm suddenly realizing that oh, the toxicity. Oh, the toxicity. I see what you're saying. Well, I mean, I didn't go any further than than basically sort of analyzing that research paper that we found, or that was linked to me by I forget who sent it to me. Somebody on the Twitch stream sent me that paper. So yeah, I just read over that paper, right? And I didn't really go much further because I felt like it was pretty. I felt like it made sense. Sort of the key takeaways from it kind of made sense to me. I think the interesting thing would be to like kind of go to the next step and be like, well, what do we do to fix it, right? That's the hard part. It seems to me like it's just part of human nature almost, honestly. And especially, it seems like it's human nature, especially younger male behavior. So like males from the age of like 14 to like 20, early 20s. For some reason, well, not for some reason, it's probably like biologically related or like hormonally driven or evolutionarily selected for, or, you know, these kinds of things. Maybe even a little bit culturally selected for as well. There's a high level of sort of competition, but competition in the regards of almost like trying to position yourself in a sort of a local hierarchy in which you want to make sure that you're definitely not at the bottom of the hierarchy, like you're not the one being bullied or picked on. So what ends up happening is, right, one person who is sort of, you know, either collectively or just happenstance or somehow gets identified as maybe the weakest individual in that local group is the one that tends to be bullied and picked on. And sort of the mechanism by which that works is in part, I think, from what we learned, was like, you don't want to be, right? Nobody wants to be the one that's being bullied. So one of the ways to prevent yourself from being the one that's being bullied is to scapegoat somebody else into being bullied. Right? So the idea is, if somebody else is being bullied, that means you're not. So it's in your best interest to keep that other person in the hot seat. So that's one thing, but it's also like, it's a way of fitting in with the group, because it's like, that's how like everyone else kind of like, if you bully that person, like now everyone kind of shares that in common. I don't know. That's one thing. There's a lot of other things, like the idea of like tribalism a little bit, being on a team. It's a team game. It's competitive. I don't know. There's a lot in there. It's a complex issue. And the anonymity doesn't help either. You know what they should have? You know what they should have? They should have League. If you want to play League competitively, you should be forced to have your like a webcam on, and so that like your video is, people can actually see you, and you have to talk like in a Zoom setting. It would make people way less likely to rage, or whatever the term is nowadays. What up, Max? Mr. Moosehugs, I really appreciate you helping out Ashi. She's She's a questioner. She always wants to know the deepest details of all these things. But I appreciate it because I've learned a lot just over the last few months of her just asking questions and me having to like research stuff. How did the COVID conspiracy go, Max? So what I've learned, I don't even know, I probably spent about 8 total hours over the course of like a week reading scientific papers on the genetic analyses of SARS-CoV-2 and how it's compared to things like the RATG13 and how it compares to the pangolin virus and the genetic origins of these and the RBD domains and the furin cleavage sites and the glycon sites and all that stuff. Ultimately, what I realized, or I guess what I feel like I learned, is the problem is, like, it seems like there is no conclusive evidence yet as to the origin, right? So the origin of the virus is still unknown. So what that does is it opens the door for potential hypotheses, right? One of those hypotheses, so the conspiracy is, the conspiracy that's completely outlandish is the conspiracy based off of the bioweapon thing, where people are like, oh, it's outlandish. I mean, is it possible? Like, sure, it's possible. Like, anything's possible technically, but the amount of people that would have to be involved in that and would have to keep things secret and not have any leaks seem pretty crazy, right? So the way I kind of look at it is, even if something is technically possible because it hasn't been 100% proven to be impossible, the more complicated the story is and the more people that would be required to kind of keep something quiet, the less likely it is to be true, right? Like, there's a way easier explanation for something like SARS-CoV-2. But the whole bioweapon thing is kind of crazy. But like the more realistic version of that is like a potential like leak from a lab where there was a gain of function research being done, where people were sort of putting pieces of viruses together to kind of see how does a virus look or behave, to try and predict like what should we be looking for, in wild populations, to see if there's any possible viruses that might jump into humans from other species. Right. So like that research is being done, like, no doubt about it. Right. And there are these, biosafety level 3 and 4 labs doing these kinds of research, and they go out and they collect viruses from nature, and then they do stuff with them in the lab. Right? And it's possible that it can leak, and things have leaked from labs before. I mean, even the original SARS did leak. There were several occasions where people accidentally got pricked or had faulty equipment or something like that, and things have happened. So I mean, that's kind of the theory, but like ultimately it seems like the easiest explanation based off of the genetics that I've looked into and what most scientists agree with is that SARS-CoV-2 is simply a natural virus that evolved in bats, and is closely related to another bat coronavirus. Most likely could have done one of two things. It could have jumped to an intermediate, it probably jumped to an intermediate host, usually like a domesticated or a livestock animal, because typically people and bats don't come into contact directly very often. So for the most part, like that, you'd need like an animal that humans do come into contact more often. So it might be like a bat was the original source, but that got into an intermediate host, and then that infected a human. And it could have been, for all we know, the virus could have been in a human population for years, for like 10, 20, 30, 40 years, just slowly like going back and forth into a human, back to the animal, into the human, back to the animal. And eventually, sometime in 2019, the right mutation happened that made it, okay, now I can really spread to other people, right? The right mutation popped up. And that's what people think happened. And the genetic evidence kind of supports that. The only problem is we haven't found the missing link. What we need to find is a very similar virus in domesticated animals that links the bat virus to the current SARS-CoV-2 virus, like an intermediary virus that's close. That's like 99% related to SARS-CoV-2 because the bat virus is like 96%. And that 4% distance is on the scale of about 50 years. It takes about 50 years for a 4% change. So what we need to find is something that's more closely related in an intermediate host that could kind of bridge the gap, right? So for example, I'll pull up my paint thing again. So like here you have SARS-CoV-2, and then you have RATG13, right? This is the bat virus. This is the human one. What the phylogenetic research shows is that they share a common ancestor, right? There's a common ancestor of these two viruses. Now, the RATG13 virus cannot really infect humans. It doesn't have the right RBD, which is the receptor binding domain. This receptor binding domain is important for allowing the virus to get into human cells through an ACE2 receptor that human cells have. If you don't have the right RBD, you can't infect certain species. So every species has its own version of the ACE2 receptor. And so dependent on the RBD that you have as a virus, it allows you to infect a variety of different species. So the RATG13 has an RBD that allows it to infect bats, but it doesn't really work for humans. Now, SARS-CoV-2 has a really nice RBD in terms of binding to the human ACE2 receptor. Now, this was about 50 years ago, is based on the phylogenetic data. So 50 years ago, SARS-CoV-2 and RATG13 split off and evolved separately because there's about a 4% difference between these two. Now, what we need to find is something over here. If we can find this, this will tell us where SARS-CoV-2 came from. If we find this in nature, it's going to put a lid on the lab leak hypothesis because now we have a clear evolutionary path. So that's what we have to wait on. We have to wait for people to find that. And people are doing that. They're collecting samples. We have to go out and collect samples from all these different animals as far as we can, as many as we can, until somebody somewhere in some lab sequences one of the viruses they collect and go, oh, wait, this is 99% similar to SARS-CoV. Let's look at that. Okay, there it is. That's the one. Now, the problem is if we never find this, which is possible, we might not, then people are always going to be able to point to this and be like, well, it could have been in a lab because if you want me to go down this a little bit more, basically like what people, there's this other thing. There's this other virus that's like over here that's distantly related to these. It's in a pangolin. It's like pangolin, CoV, something like that. CoVG or something like that. I don't know. The thing is, this has a bad RBD. This has a good RBD. Okay? For humans, to get into human cells. Pangolin CoVG has a good RBD. So this one can get into humans pretty well. And it turns out that the RBD on SARS-CoV-2 is very similar to this pangolin one. But the rest of the SARS-CoV-2 is very similar to the RATG13. So what people think is that some lab somewhere took the RBD from the pangolin and the backbone from the RAT-RG and combined them to make SARS-CoV-2 in a lab. And then that leaked. That's the lab leak hypothesis. And it's not disproven yet. There's some evidence in the sequencing that might mean that this is probably not what happened, that it could be convergent evolution, but again, it's not disproven. So again, you're going to have people out there. All right. That's my spiel. I don't know if you wanted all that, Max, but you got my brain dump. You got my brain dump of what I learned. So the too long didn't read. We don't know the origin. The odds that it came from a lab, pretty low. Not impossible, but pretty low. Most likely it came from nature through what's called a zoonosis event, right, where it originates in in nature and jumps to humans. We just need to do more sampling to find the intermediate virus. All right, sorry, let me go back to the chat here. Hpa, should I play? I'm not gonna. I can't get into the league. I'm sorry, man. I've gone into it before and it have not had good experience with it. I'm sure it's a blast. Unfortunately, I just can't do it. I'd be down to play like GeoGuessr with you, or Scribble. Keep it a little more simple. Yash, could we research Narcan activates reuptake? Narcan activates reuptake. Never heard of that. Did I look into the health portion of COVID? Something like O positive basically being immune. I didn't. Nope, I did not, Max. Did not look into that. It was more for me, I was more researching the conspiracy thing because I was sick of hearing people talk about stuff they didn't know anything about. People were like, it's amazing. It's amazing just how much someone will talk about something with knowing so little about it. It baffles my mind. It's insane. Okay, so this Narcan, let me see, Mr. Moosehogs has given some info here. Essentially, Narcan essentially has the highest affinity for all types of opioid receptors and displaces other opioids. Narcan also has no activating effects on the receptor. So, without knowing anything more besides just reading what Moosehug's description of that, which I had never even heard of that before. Hey, thanks for the follow, Porky Harp. Appreciate you. Let me think. Sorry, I got off track. Yeah, so Mr. Moosehugs, based off what I'm just reading from what you said, it sounds to me like this would be used probably as a way to treat opioid addiction. Is that right? Or as a way to sort of, or as a way to treat an opioid overdose, right? If a person comes in who is like overdosed on opioids, you can give them Narcan, which will like boot out the opioids, like kick them out. Dunning-Kruger effect. Yeah, the Dunning-Kruger effect, man. It's real, for sure. So, Yash, do you want to know anything more about Narcan? Or did our resident MD, Mr. Moosehugs, give you the deets you needed? Hey, Master Dabber. Appreciate you. Thanks for the follow, man. All right, at this time, it seems to me that was good. All right, sweet. None of us are immune to the Dunning-Kruger effect. That's true. Actually, I have definitely talked out my ass about things before. But usually I know when I'm doing it, usually. But then again, by definition, with the Dunning-Kruger effect, you might not actually know you're doing it, right? Is that the idea? All right, Aria, take it easy. Thanks for stopping in. Always here to help. I will see you in bio. Master Dabber, can I try Warframe today? It's already almost 9 o'clock, and I'm gonna be honest. My girlfriend has been getting mad at me lately for playing, for staying on the stream till like yesterday. I was on till like 10:30, so I need to like be more careful about not going past like 9:30, 9:45 with my streams because you know, a little bit rude sometimes that I can be. So I gotta keep myself in check. How long? What is Warframe? And the way you phrased "Can I try Warframe today?" for some reason makes me feel like that was something we had talked about before. But it feels like the first time I'm hearing about this. Am I wrong? A Warframe. Hold on. Let's see. Let me take a look at this Warframe. Let's go ahead and Warframe is a cooperative, free-to-play third-person online action game set in an evolving sci-fi world. Okay. 91% positive reviews. Looks good. Let's hold on. Yeah, the partner anger. It's not really anger. It's more like how do I phrase it? It's like, I mean, the word disappointment comes to mind, but it's more just sort of a general feeling of you don't want to let them down, or you don't want to disrespect them. Like you want to respect that, like their wishes, and you just don't want to be too selfish sometimes. So I got to be better about that. Mr. Chang, congrats. Congratulations. You are done, and you are free from the finals. Oh, this is a free game? How does this game even, what's the Warframe gameplay? Maybe neglect. Maybe neglect.
The operator with better modded firepower. Oh, the violation.
Just want to get a sense of this game. So third person. Whoa. This is giving me a little bit of like Unreal Tournament vibes, to be honest.
This data vault is equipped with a variety of security measures. How you defeat those measures is up to you.
Am I wrong with the Unreal Tournament vibes on this one? It's like a third person Unreal. So what's the it's a cooperative game? I feel like every game has adopted the slide. You guys notice that? Every game you can like slide now. Who invented the slide? Was it Apex? Did Apex Legends or Apex Am I wrong on that? Didn't Apex the Apex one start the slide? And now everyone's like, oh, we gotta get the slides in there. Slides is the new meta.
The target console is nearby. If you trigger the alarms now, the enemy will
Yash, you want
start
to play
destroying
Apex
data.
sometimes? Oh, Warframe came out before Apex. Okay, I was wrong. Black Ops 3 had the slide first, Porky. Okay. But yeah, maybe I just noticed it with Apex, but I feel like every game has it. Like even Satisfactory, this game that's about building a factory, has a slide in it. Like you can slide. Like you're running to go from like, oh, I gotta put a conveyor belt over here. You can like slide your way to do that. It's pretty funny. It's fun though. I understand why it's in the game because it's a fun mechanic. It adds like a new dimension to moving from one place to another. That's fun. I understand that. So it seems like, we have, let's see. Master Dabber wants me to try Warframe. Yash, you're interested in Warframe.
Data extracted. They won't even know it's gone.
We could do Warframe.
This segment is yours.
I know that I usually play
Attention
boring
extraction.
games because I'm into like really boring
As every
games.
moment passes, the Ascaris burrows deeper.
And I know that about myself. I like to play like really kind of mundane games that aren't that exciting to watch. But if people are interested in Warframe, we could get that going. It's not going to happen tonight. Because I'd have to download it, install it, and it's already 9 o'clock, and so there's no way this is going to happen tonight. But this could be something we do tomorrow. I could have this set up for tomorrow. For sure. Okay. All right, Ashi, I'm going to answer your question here. You might have missed it, but the glucose and tryptophan thing, why does that relation occur? So the question that you wanted to know was, how does glucose increase tryptophan levels? Glucose, let's see. Glucose and tryptophan. Man, I'm typing really tryptophan. Let's see if there's a diagram that shows us the process. Nope. Moose hugs. Thanks for all your help tonight. I think you made the office hour stream 10 times better, man. I really appreciate your bringing your expertise into the chat. You didn't have to do that. So, awesome. Thanks, dude. Have a good night. I'll see you around. All right, later, Master Dabber. I will see you later as well. If you want to see me try Warframe, come on tomorrow. I'll give it a shot. And then Yash, if you jump on tomorrow too, we can do that as well. I'm not sure exactly how it works. You'll have to like give me a real quick tutorial. So first of all, Ashi, where did you get this information from that glucose leads to tryptophan? Like, I am actually not 100% sure that this is even a thing. Like, where did you learn this? Tryptophan suppresses rise in blood glucose and preserves insulin secretion in type 2 diabetes rats. Man, I don't know. Does glucose increase tryptophan. You looked it up, but it was like Saturday when watching the lecture, so I don't have the link. The effect of insulin upon the influx of tryptophan into the brain of the rabbit. Raised levels of insulin in the blood affect the supply of tryptophan to the brain in two opposing ways. By increasing the binding of tryptophan to the albumin in the blood, thereby reducing the level of free tryptophan in the circulation by about half, which would decrease the influx of tryptophan into the brain. B. By simultaneously reducing the levels in the blood of 6 or more amino acids, which compete with tryptophan for transport carriers into the brain, which would increase the influx of tryptophan. The net result of these two opposing effects is that insulin causes only a slight increase in the influx of tryptophan to the brain. To account in quantitative terms for the effect of insulin upon the influx of tryptophan into the brain, it proved necessary to make one assumption. This assumption was that a predictable proportion of tryptophan, which is loosely bound to blood albumin, is being stripped off this protein by the transport carrier located on the luminal surface membranes and the endothelial cells during the passage of the blood through the It is the assumption. If this assumption is accepted, the work reported here explains adequately the effects of insulin. Okay, well, there's an assumption in their work. Interesting. Yeah, I don't know, Ashi. This is looking like a dead end to me. I'll be honest with you, I'm not seeing a clear connection here in this brief research. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, here's an article about the effect of plasma glucose and glucagon after tryptophan ingestion in man. In men only. This was published in 1977. This was back when people used the word man ubiquitously for everything. This is the opposite of what you're asking for, right? This evaluates the effect of tryptophan on blood sugar. Not the opposite. You are asking for sugar. You are asking for glucose on tryptophan. The reverse. In contrast, the hypoglycemia tryptophan indicates the amino acid increases. So apparently, if you eat tryptophan, it increases your glucose, but only if you're a man, apparently, and you're from 1977. I don't even know about this. Well, is this a new one? This is a newer one. 2012. Tryptophan suppresses the rise in blood glucose and preserves insulin secretion in type 2 diabetes. So that could be helpful. So it seems to me, Ashi, that there's somewhat of a connection between tryptophan and blood glucose, but it's not the way you phrased it, so maybe you don't really even care about that at this point, because it's not really related to your initial phrasing of it. So, yeah, no. Of course you care. I thought you were going to let me off the hook. Couldn't you sense that I was not that interested in researching this particular thing? But you do care. Okay. Well, what do you care about? What in particular? Like the any connection between the two? Give me something I can sink my teeth into here. What are we looking for? Are you looking for something in particular about diabetes? Or what? Oop, I hear Jameson barking. Jameson barking. Jameson might be trying to get me out of this, Ashi. I think he knows. He senses my No worries, Ashi. I was just joking, by the way. You know that. All right. Well, if you think about something you want to look into more about this, let me know next time and we'll dive into it. But other than that, have a good night. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. You're going to start learning all this extra stuff that's not relevant to the test. Might kind of not be the best idea. That's fair. That is fair. Okay, well, it seems to me that we've reached sort of a good place to stop for the night. I'm looking at... Wait, did I disconnect again or what? All right, bye, Ashi. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Anyway, I think I'm going to call it a night here. But yeah. All right, everybody. I appreciate you. I will see you all tomorrow, and we'll do some Warframe maybe. Okay. All right. Peace be with y'all. Bye.